What up, what up, what up, what up? The real MVPs here, and today we're gonna talk about uh, why ponds isn't always similar to lakes. So let's get to it. So check this out. A lot of my beginners, a lot of the teenagers, a lot of the kids, stuff like that, y'all are gonna start off fishing ponds. That might be your only access. If you don't have a boat, you're probably gonna be fishing ponds. So ponds, okay, check this out. So you always watch YouTube and you see these professional anglers and they promote certain baits or certain techniques and stuff like that. And I'm not to say that those won't work on your pond. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is certain techniques work better than other techniques when it comes to pond fishing versus lake fishing. See what I'm saying? So on a lake, you can get away with throwing a trailer on a spinner bait. You can get away with throwing bigger weights, bigger baits, stuff like that. On a pond, you're not always going to be able to get away with doing things like that. A lot of times, finesse options are your better options. So even if you can go finesse, you can always go even more finesse. So check this out. Say you're throwing a trailer on a spinnerbait. Let's go even more finesse. Take the trailer off of the spinnerbait. You don't need it. Let's just present a smaller presentation to the fish. That's one way we can go finesse. Okay, you're throwing a Texas rig. You probably have a weight on it. 3/8, I don't know, 1/8, quarter ounce, whatever. Take the weight off. Throw weightless. You see what I'm saying? You can always go more finesse than what you're going. And say you're going a weightless worm, now you might go to a Ned rig. You can always go more finesse. Shaky head. You know what I'm saying? You can always go more finesse. So you can take pond fishing to a lake, but you can't always take lake fishing to a pond, if that makes sense. So what I'm saying by that is finesse options are your better options when it comes to pond fishing. I'm just saying. Swim bait worms, shaky head, jig, and small swim baits, those would work pretty good on a pond, you know what I'm saying? But when you talk about crankbaits, when you talk about frogs, when you talk about bigger bait options, those won't always, I'm not saying those don't work on a pond. I'm not saying those don't work on a pond, because there's plenty of times where you can get them to work. What I'm saying is those are more specific options. So if you see lily pads, if you see a brush pile, if you see a dock, if you see something sticking out of the water, these baits like this, like crankbaits, frogs, jigs, bigger baits, stuff like that, those are going to be like a more specified area, a more specific place or thing, you know, dock, wood pile, brush, anything like that. That's where you would try to, you know, get that bigger bait to work, is where you think that bigger bass would live. You're not just going to be chunking a bigger bait to be chunking a bigger bait. It's almost kind of like junk fishing. You have to know when to throw what. Spinnerbait, swim jigs, those are always going to be working, you know what I'm saying? But you got to play around with colors. You got to play around with trailers on the swim jigs. And, you know, if you want to know how to pick a spinnerbait, I got a video for that. Go check that out. But as far as swim jig and stuff like that go, you know, natural colors in clear water, brim colors, whites, stuff like that. Muddy water, your black and blues, your purple and golds, your off the wall colors, things of that nature. You know, you can play around with your more off the wall colors. If you got something that's been sitting in your tackle box, you've been like, I don't really know about that color. Throw it in muddy water. See what happens. You know, like I said, weightless is always better. Weightless is always better in a pond situation. I'm telling you, there's so many times I'll be throwing weightless and it just gets more bites because the fish, I don't know, it's just something about the fall rate. It's something about that fall rate. It's more natural, something coming down just slowly like this versus just boom right there. Even if the bait is small, I've noticed if you put a weight on it and it drops right in front of the fish, I'll be looking, sight fishing, and the bait will just drop and they'll just look at it. But then once you throw that weightless worm in there and they just kind of creeps on in there, there's something about that weightless worm, or weightless anything. Weightless fluke, weightless worm, weightless anything. If you can get away with throwing weightless on a pond, do that. And also, last but not least, you don't always need braid. I see so many dudes throwing braid. And I'm assuming they think because it's braid that it's stronger. It's on a wrap. Versus a mono or a fluoro or a copoly, anything like that, it's gonna have a little give to bounce back off of that limb. So, even underwater, if you get hung up on a brush pile, that braid's liable to wrap, liable to dig in, and fluoro, mono, copolymer, a little bit more forgiving, especially in pond situations. If you don't always know the limbs and what docks and rocks and wood and everything else and grass and stuff, you don't really know what you're gonna run into on a pond. So also, fish are finicky. If you can go finesse, like I said, go more finesse. So why not use 20-pound fluoro, 20-pound mono instead of 65-pound braid? Just something a little bit clearer, something a little bit more natural. And I'm not saying that braid bothers the fish, but if I'm flipping a worm in there, if I'm flipping something and I'm going to sit in front of the fish's face, I very rarely throw braid. I always put braid backing on and then I throw a leader. So, and my leader is so long that I might as well be throwing regular line. But that's me. That's just how I do things. But that's pond fishing. You don't always take what you can take from a lake to a pond, but you can take what you learn from a pond to a lake. So next time you do hit a lake with your friend, or you are able to go rent a boat or get on a boat, then you can take what you've learned from learning the pond, and then you can go and apply that to the lake. So you watch these videos and you hear these professional anglers, and they promote certain types of techniques and certain baits and stuff like that, and you just have to be a little weary, especially if you're a pond guy, because finesse is always better than some of these crankbaits, some of these bigger baits, some of these, if you can go more finesse, I'm telling you, you will have better outcomes on a pond. That's just my opinion, and that's my experience as well, And like I said, I'm not saying you can't throw power baits on a pond. I'm saying learn the pond, and then know where you can use those power techniques.